Hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth in our series of webinars about building the HS2 West Midlands stations. I'm Rachel and I'm the Senior Community Engagement and Stakeholder Manager for Interchange Station. This session focuses on building bridges, specifically two highway bridges that our contractor LM installed over the M42 and A446 in the summer and autumn of last year. The installation of these bridges was one of the first pieces of really significant construction that our contractors have done on HS2. And it was a huge collaborative effort to ensure that we installed the bridges safely and efficiently, whilst managing and minimising the impact on the very busy road network in the area. The team today are going to give you an idea of the scale of the challenge, how we work collaboratively between HS2, LM and Highways England to successfully install the bridges and reopen the road network ahead of time. Before we get to that, there's just a couple of housekeeping issues that I want to cover. So we don't anticipate any technical issues during our event, but should you experience any connection issues, for instance, if your feed freezes, wait for about 10 seconds and it will most likely correct itself. If that doesn't happen, use the leave button to exit the event and rejoin using the event link. If that still doesn't fix the issues, don't worry, we will be uploading today's session to our YouTube channel, and so you'll be able to rewatch it at a later date. We'll email all ticket holders to let you know when this recording is available to view. So for the webinar today, I'm going to kick things off by providing an overview of the HS2 project, and apologies to those who've joined us before for the other parts of these series as we cover a bit of the same ground, but we do feel that this overview is quite important for anyone new to our webinar to just set the scene. I'll then hand over to Alistair, who is a project manager with HS2 and led on the installation of the highways bridges over the M42 and the A446 for HS2. From Nick, who's a project manager from our enabling works contractor, Laing O'Rourke and J Murphy Limited, or LM for short. LM have been preparing the way for our main works contractor, Balfour Beatty Vinci, and the contractor who will build the station since 2017. And a key part of their work in this area has been in amending the highways to ensure that the station's accessible once it's operational. Nick was one of the key project managers involved in the installation of the bridges, and he is going to cover the work that we did in the run-up to the installations and then the weekend of the M42 installation itself. We're also really lucky today that we have been joined by colleagues from Highways England. Both of our highway bridges were installed across a part of the road network that is managed by Highways England, and so we're delighted that we've got Frank with us to talk about the installation from a Highways England perspective. And then at the end of the session, we'll be joined by Tim, who's Divisional Director for Highways England, with responsibility for Highways England's interaction with HS2 for the Q&A panel. That Q&A will take place at the end of the session, so please do feel free to pop your questions into the comments area as we go through the presentations, and we'll deal with those at the end of the session Q&A bit. We might not be able to answer all of the questions that you post in the chat, but we will do our best. If we don't manage to answer your question, please do get in touch with our help desk after the webinar, and we can then follow up with you, and we give you details of the help desk and how to contact that at the end. So, as I said, we'll start with a brief overview of the HS2 project, just for those who aren't aware of what the project is and what it's about. It is HS2. HS2 will be the new high-speed backbone of our rail network, connecting the city centres of Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds and London. We're building HS2 in 3 phases. The dark blue line on the map that's on the screen shows phase 1 of the route, which is currently under construction and goes from London to the West Midlands. This is due for a phased opening between 2029 and 2033. Phase 2A is shown in bright light blue on this map, and that will go from the West Midlands to Crewe. The Phase 2A bill, which gives us the powers we need to build this section of the railway, was given assent earlier this year, and the opening date for this part of the route will be brought into line with the Phase 1 opening, and that will speed up connections to the north of England. Phase 2B, which goes to Leeds in the east and Manchester in the north, is currently being developed. Phase 1 of the project will include construction of 4 new stations, each a mega project unlocking thousands of new jobs and homes. There are 2 stations planned for the West Midlands, Interchange Station in Solihull and a new terminus station in Birmingham city centre called Curzon Street Station. HS2 is complete, you'll be able to get to London from Interchange Station in 38 minutes, saving 32 minutes on the current journey time. The line will also be integrated into the East and West Coast main lines, so the HS2 trains can cross over to the existing network and serve the towns and cities in the north. HS2 trains will stop at over 25 stations, serving around half the population and cutting journey times north to south. The construction of HS2 is also playing a vital role in Britain's economic recovery from COVID-19. There are over 16,000 people already working on the project, both directly and across our UK-wide supply chain. There are over 240 active work sites between London and Birmingham, and 2,000 businesses have already delivered works for HS2. 70% of those businesses are small to medium-sized enterprises, and over 95% are based in the UK. Local economic plans based around HS2 also show almost 500,000 jobs and nearly 90,000 new homes resulting from the improved connectivity that these services will provide across the country. HS2 will be the most important economic regeneration project in Britain for decades. It will create jobs and opportunities for people up and down the country, improve living standards, increase productivity, and help Britain compete on the global stage. I've explained what HS2 is and some of the benefits of the scheme, and we're now going to play a short video which gives you a bit more detail about exactly why Britain needs HS2.
Most of Britain's railway network was built over 100 years ago. The same network is still used today and was never designed to run as many services as it does. It's overcrowded, and we need more space and capacity to improve local, regional and freight journeys. Cars, lorries and planes have a huge impact on climate change. We need a cleaner, greener mode of transport in line with Britain's commitment to become net zero by 2050. We need to connect people and places across the nation to help level up the country, boost local economies and provide more opportunities for millions of people. HS2 will revolutionise the way we travel, addressing these three key problems. When completed, 345 miles of brand new high-speed track will run between Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds and London, joining up the UK's major cities, connecting 30 million people. The new railway will add vital capacity to our overcrowded rail network by placing high-speed trains on their own set of tracks. This will create thousands of extra seats for more commuter services at over 100 stations on the UK's existing network and free up space for more freight by rail. HS2 will take cars and lorries off the road while reducing the need for domestic air travel, leading to a reduction in carbon emissions, improving our air quality. Bringing the nation closer together will boost growth, create new jobs and open up leisure opportunities for millions of people. HS2, more capacity, cutting carbon and better connectivity.
Brilliant. I'm always very relieved when that works. So the focus of today's webinar is, of course, Interchange Station, which we're currently preparing the way for, with LM doing the early works, such as utility diversions, site preparation, archaeology in some areas, and of course, works to the highways. Balfour Beatty Vinci, our main works contractor, are starting to take over most of the work sites in this area as LM's work moves towards completion. And we've also started the procurement process for a contractor to do the final detailed design and construction of the station. Interchange Station is obviously the whole purpose of all the works being done in this area, and these images show a few aspects of the fantastic design that Arup has produced. Their design has already won a World Architecture News Gold Award, and as you'll be aware if you attended our last webinar about BREEAM and environmental sustainability, the design of the station has been rated as BREEAM Outstanding, which makes it one of the most environmentally friendly buildings in the world. If you want to find out more about BREEAM or about station design, the webinars we did about those are available on our YouTube channel. So now I'm going to hand over to Alistair to tell you a bit more about how we're connecting the station into the existing highway network.
Hi everyone, I'm going to give you a bit of background to the bridge installations and to the highway scheme in general. So first, if you look at the location, the bridges are part of a major highway scheme being undertaken by HS2 in the vicinity of the new interchange station. As you can see, the station is to the east of Birmingham in Solihull, just to the east of the M42. If we zoom in a bit closer, we can see that the station is in the vicinity of several key motorways and A roads, including the M42, the M6 and the A45. There are also several key junctions here, including M6 Junction 4, the junction for Coleshill and Wateraughton, M42 Junction 6, the junction for the NEC and Birmingham Airport, and Stonebridge Island. The question might well be asked as to why an organisation that builds railways is doing such a highway scheme. And there are three reasons for this. The first is to realign some of the roads to make space for a new bridge that our main works contractor, UBB, will be constructing to carry the HS2 line over the M42. The second is to mitigate any additional burden imposed on some of the key junctions in the areas by traffic using the interchange station. And the third is to create new accesses to the new interchange station. And I'll expand on these points in the next slide. To expand a bit on the first reason, the image on the left shows the area as it was before we started. As you can see, there is a roundabout over the M42. The image on the right shows how this will be changed by HS2. You can see that where the roundabout was is a new structure that carries the HS2 line over the M42. And unfortunately, the new structure and the existing roundabout cannot coexist. So before installing the new structure, we first need to move the roundabout to the south and connect it to the existing road network, hence the need for the bridges. The second reason for HS2 doing highway works in this area is that it is predicted that traffic going to and from the interchange station will put additional pressure on existing junctions in the area. We therefore need to do upgrades to Stonebridge Island, M6 Junction 4, the junction for Coleshill and Wateraughton, and also M42 Junction 6, the junction for the NEC and Birmingham Airport. However, that particular junction is actually being upgraded anyway as part of a much wider scheme that Highways England is doing in this area. The third reason is to connect the new station to the existing highway network via access points from the new roundabout and also from the Chester Road, as you can see in these photos. So let's take a closer look at what this is all going to look like. If we start with the existing roundabout that spans over the M42, this used to connect into the Birmingham Business Park. So this is now being replaced by a T-junction with a free flow slip, allowing traffic to bypass the junction. Coming further around, we are upgrading an existing roundabout that serves the NEC, and we are enlarging this to connect to the new bridge over the M42 to create an elongated roundabout that we call a longabout. Some people may be aware that the Solihull Urban Growth Company are also delivering enhancements to this roundabout in the form of a cut-through, which will increase the capacity of the roundabout in the future. We then need to link the highway network to the west of the M42 to the new roundabout near the station, which we do via a new bridge installed by our enabling works contractors LMJV, which is the focus of this presentation. This image shows the new roundabout connecting the A446 and the A452 to replace the existing roundabout over the M42. This roundabout spans over the top of the new HS2 line, so we have to construct two new bridges to carry the new roundabout over HS2. We have also undertaken further work to this roundabout on behalf of the Urban Growth Company to widen the bridges and embankments in order to future-proof this junction and enable an additional lane to be installed at a future date. We then need to connect this roundabout back into the Chester Road on the other side, which we achieved via the construction of a new bridge over the A446, which was also installed by our enabling works contractors in the same manner as for the M42. I will now hand over to Nick from LMJV to talk us through more detail as to how the bridges were built.
Thank you, Alistair. The two bridges that we're highlighting today, as Alistair just mentioned, are key strategic bridges within the area, allowing for the realignment of the highways. As you can see from the layout, the M42 bridge shown here on the left provides a link between Area A, which contains the NEC, Resorts World, Birmingham Business Park and connection to the airport from the strategic road network. The overbridge shown here on the right provides a connection from the interchange station roundabout spanning over the HS2 line back onto the A446 and southbound towards the A45 and the M42 junction 6. As with any major construction project, key milestone dates are fundamental to allow the construction of works to be developed in order to deliver the programme, and installation of the bridges on over two of the busiest roads in the Midlands were no exception. If anything, they required far more detailed planning and coordination with a wider range of parties than usual. So, to agree the date for the required closures, the M42 and the 446, we consulted with a number of significant parties and identified specific weekends where any disruption would be least impactful on the number of road users based on historical traffic data and forecast event numbers. As part of these discussions, we presented and explained innovative construction proposals which considered the impact on the area and minimised this as much as possible. With the traditional style of bridge construction, you can see the supporting abutments are generally cast in situ, with the deck beams being placed progressively, either singly or in pairs. Temporary formwork installed in the gaps between the beams and the concrete slab, and then is cast on top. This approach requires a significant amount of temporary works, a large working area around the footprint of the build, and would require several weeks of lane restrictions, lane closures, or full closures on the network to allow the segmental installation of the components. The alternative installation solution, innovative solution that was utilised, reduced requirement for the multiple closures, and indeed the only full closure of the network was required for the installation with a single weekend, fully minimising the impact of the local area and the road users. The abutments themselves consisted of over 100 individual precast units, all prefabricated in factory-controlled environments, providing excellent quality control. Units were then transported to site to suit the construction programme on a just-in-time strategy, again minimising the amount of movements and preventing possible damage from repeated lifting of these units. Abutments in their modular form require far less operatives to construct, and the abutments installed on the top of the park cap with a team of 8, which was including the crane driver. Normal traditional construction methods would require 3 or 4 times as many operatives on the ground. The M42 deck at 65 metres long, 35 metres wide, and weighing in at around 2,750 tonnes, was constructed in an area adjacent to the motorway, allowing the motorway to remain fully operational until the installation weekend, minimising the impact on the public. The installation methodology chosen for both structures to minimise impact on the area was the use of an SPMT. This is a self-propelled modular transporter on which the completed bridge decks were lifted and transported into its final position from the construction area. The SPMT used for the movement of the M42 deck, which was the larger of the 2 bridges, had 28 axles, 448 tyres and a lifting capacity of over 4,000 tonnes. The SPMTs arrived to site on the back of several articulated wagons and were assembled on site within the working platform area. So before the deck could be installed, we obviously had to build it first. And to enable the bridge decks to be fabricated offline and transported in position on the SPMTs, large areas of land adjacent to both the M42 and the 446 were excavated. Adjacent to the M42, as you can see on the right-hand side, some 36,000 cubic metres of spoil was removed and a stoneworking platform was constructed. It was capable of withstanding the high axle loadings during the movement of the bridge deck, ensuring that the SPMT didn't get stuck on its travels. The steel girders were transported to site and bolted together with pair of beams weighing in at over 55 tonnes each. There were 4 pairs to connect at either end and install, and within the middle there were 8 single beams weighing in at 50 tonnes each and around 30 metres long. The completed steel frame, the M42, is in the background of the picture on the right-hand side, give you an idea of scale that we were building. Once the steel frame had been built and checked, we placed over 240 precast deck units on top, stitched them all together with reinforcements and concrete, which formed the deck itself. The completed deck was then raised up from its temporary trestles, 8 metres from the ground level, by hydraulic jacks, and the SPMTs positioned underneath, ready for the installation. The deck was then subject to a small trial lift and move on the SPMTs ahead of the week enclosure to make sure that everything was right and allow us to check for any movement in the deck that could potentially impact the stability during the transport, and allow for us to review and gain acceptance by the structural engineers. With the closure of the M42 between junction 6 and 7 in both directions, significant planning had to take place for the diversion route to ensure that the closure had minimal impact. The diversion routes chosen were reviewed in depth with Highways England and local highways authorities, as we'll hear from Frank later on, and to ensure that the impact on travel times was as low as possible. As mentioned earlier, during the initial planning, we identified optimum dates for installation, where we could also secure a contingency weekend following the initial weekend installation, so things not quite go to plan. The detailed planning for the weekend closures commenced 12 months ahead of the actual installation date, and many reviews were held in the lead up to the milestone date. As you will see here, there were 11 key strategic go-no-go meetings and readiness reviews held within these 12 months, where the progress on site was reviewed by all involved in the delivery to ensure that the dates could still be achieved and any issues arising during the process could be discussed and mitigated. All the months of preparation led us to the installation weekend of the 7th of August 2020. This was one of the hottest days of the year and in the midst of the COVID pandemic, but with all the meticulous planning undertaken in the previous month, the deck was successfully installed and the M42 opened up some 22 hours ahead of the planned reopening time. And there's a time-lapse video towards the end of this presentation. Not one to rest on our laurels, we repeated the feat on a slightly smaller scale a couple of months later when we installed the 1,000-ton bridge spanning the A446. This installation presented slightly different challenges to that of the M42, with limited space and a lot more physical work required during the closure weekend itself. We had to build one of the carriageways on the 446 with over a metre of compacted stone to provide the flat running surface for the SPMT to run on. And despite the challenging October weather, the bridge was also successfully installed and the road reopened to traffic ahead of programme with no incidents or issues. So happy to take any questions you may have at the back end. And I'll now pass over to Frank, who can tell you about Highways England involvement.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frank Bird, one of the senior network planners for Highways England. I joined the company 17 years ago as part of the vanguard for the Traffic Officer Service. My main role is assisting in the planning and coordination of events across the West Midlands region that are likely to be key traffic generators. So what is Highways England's strategic road network? It comprises a mix of all motorway routes plus some of the key A roads in England. Here is a map showing the network that Highways England is responsible for. As you can see, the routes resemble a spider's web across the country, and they link key towns and cities as well as ports and airports. It might surprise people to know that motorways and the key routes across the country account for only 3% of the roads in the country, yet they carry nearly 32% of all its traffic. Whilst I have some influence across the country, my primary focus is the West Midlands region. The region is the crossroads of the country, linking vast areas of the population and manufacturing with each other. The primary route in the region is the Birmingham Box. This is the area around Birmingham, shaped like a box, and it is like Birmingham's Ring Road. It comprises the M42 across the south and east side, so that's the bottom and right of the map, the M5 to the west, the left-hand side, and the M6 across the top. I'm often asked, when did we start planning for this event? And it may surprise people, but we actually began as far back as 2016, when we knew that bridge crossings were going to be needed, and key partners were then engaged to see when would be the least impactful time for us to have to close the M42 locally. Before we close motorways or major A roads, we like to get an idea of the likely disruption, delays and congestion it'll cause. This helps us to then plan some of the mitigations that we need to invoke with partners. We achieve this by modelling using the most up-to-date data that we can. So, for instance, these are the sort of delays that we would have reasonably expected to see on that closure weekend. It was clear that in order to reduce the likely impact to the closures, we had to alter drivers' behaviours and expectations for the weekend closures. To achieve this, we first had to let them know that the closure was taking place. Locally and regionally, there was some great exposure to the forthcoming closures, which Rachel will talk through in a moment. But we also had to be aware that there were large numbers of people who don't live in our region and might be passing through that weekend and would need this advice. So here we have an example of the types of messages that we were setting on the motorway gantries 2 weeks before the closure. We have a variety of different gantry types around the West Midlands, as you can see from the 3 different types of text that I've shown you. And we then selected a text that was quick and easy to read, but gave motorists enough information to keep them informed. Variable message signs, as we call them, are a sort of text message on gantries at the side of the road. And they are there to remind drivers of forthcoming closures. So on the day of the closure, the coverage was further extended across a variety of routes that would have generated traffic heading towards the M42. And as you can see, we set advice in some cases nearly 100 miles away from the planned closures. One of the other tools we were able to use is time over distance advice on gantries. So what is time over distance advice? This is where Highways England give travel advice based on ANPR data. That's automatic number plate recognition data from vehicles travelling over the 2 different routes, and then comparing the time it took them to get from one side of the Birmingham box to the other. So for instance, if someone usually travels from Nottingham to Bristol around the clockwise Birmingham box, the red line in this case, it would usually take them about 28 minutes and 30 miles, as the map shows you. However, for the weekend of the closure, if they chose instead to follow our advice and take the yellow route, it would likely take them an extra 8 minutes longer to cover the extra 9 miles, but then they would have avoided the additional delays on the diversion route of about 30 minutes. Here's another example where a motorist travelling from London or Oxford, again the red route, would normally go anti-clockwise around the Birmingham box. It would usually take them 30 minutes to travel the 30 miles. However, for the weekend closure, if they chose instead to follow the yellow route, it might take them 9 minutes longer to cover the extra 10 miles, but it would then avoid about a 50-minute delay. The time over distance advice was available on all 4 corners of the Birmingham box that weekend to help motorists. Effectively, motorists could ask themselves, how much delay and congestion am I willing to accept on my usual route versus taking the slightly longer route, but knowing how much extra time it would add to my journey? We do know that this advice was taken by many motorists, as we saw the numbers using the M5 for this journey that's on the screen at the moment as an alternative, and based on previous Saturdays, sometimes up to 180 vehicles per hour were using it on that Saturday. As well as network gantries, HS2 also made provision to use extra trailer mounted variable message signs for the M42 closure to support the signing that was already out on our network. This would ensure that motorists were as well informed as they could be about the likely challenges they were going to face that weekend. So what was the impact on the network? We've captured some real-time data downloads for the weekend, so we could keep a dynamic overview of the network, both for HS2 and Highways England, but also for the local road network as well. Here's the data at 8:20 in the morning of the bridge closure on the M42. The key routes around the region are shown in green, and this is routes that are travelling at the usual speeds that you would expect to see. Amber and red shows slower moving traffic, and black would show where the traffic is almost stationary. The checkered area on the map shows the motorway section that was closed to traffic that weekend. This is the traffic at 11 o'clock. As you can see, some of the ripple effects of traffic avoiding the closure and seeking alternative routes were on display, and also that the message that we were telling people not to come to junction 6 from either direction was getting through. Whilst we use the heat mapping, we also like to see what happens on CCTV from various junctions. So we have a few images that we'd like to share with you of the scene at the bridge, M6 junction 4, which is the Coleshill turnoff, and the slip road. And you can see there's just a little bit of traffic there queuing on the slip road. And we've also got the the M42 between junction 5 Solihull, excuse me, and junction 6 for the NEC and Birmingham Airport. And as you can see, traffic is queuing very patiently, waiting to leave the motorway at junction 6. Here's an image from 1 o'clock, again a heat map image. Some of you may have spotted the red area with the accident symbol on it. This was actually nothing to do with HS2. This was a road traffic collision that resulted in traffic almost coming to a standstill, but our traffic officers dealt quickly with the incident and traffic was soon running back at its usual speeds. Whilst we were watching the cameras, at 2:30 we saw this, and we had to confess how quickly this huge bridge moved up the carriageway, and these 3 images show you its progress over a period of only 3 or 4 minutes. So we were really impressed with how quickly that bridge moved up the carriageway. And also here are some more images of the junction and work site. The M6 at junction 4 is the middle image, and you can see there is practically no traffic there coming off the M6 at junction 4 to this exit. And there's also just a handful of vehicles there. And also we've shared an image of the M42 just prior to junction 6, the Birmingham Airport turn off again. And here you can see everybody's queuing patiently, as they should do, in lane 1. And it's interesting to note that the heat mapping that you will see, although it says traffic is moving very slowly, obviously as you get nearer to the junction, you go from 3 lanes to 2 lanes to 1 lane. So the heat mapping does give a slightly skewed image of what's actually going on the route network, which is why we tried to share both sets of images with you. And then finally at 6:15 on the night, you can see all the local roads into and out of Birmingham and Coventry are back to their usual travel patterns, and there is just a slight bit of traffic queuing between junctions 5 and 6. And bear in mind that this is only a 4-mile stretch of motorway, so actually the queuing, whilst it would have been slightly uncomfortable for people who were in the queue, it worked really as well as we'd hoped, in fact better than we hoped. So what was the impact on the network for the second bridge lift? Well, at 10 a.m, when we started to see some very localised delays on the carriageway northbound past the bridge as it was closed. As you can see, there is just a little bit of congestion around the Toby pub at Stonebridge Island. By 1 p.m, traffic local to the bridge was moving briskly despite very poor weather that day, and I'll come on to that in a moment. It also gives you a good indication of what usual traffic congestion looks like around Birmingham and into and out of Coventry. And this second bridge lift had no impact in the arterial routes of both Birmingham and Coventry. So you can see the sort of levels that already are affecting Birmingham and Coventry. This is what the scene looked like, and it's worth mentioning that despite this being a potential distraction for passing motorists, we did keep more of the local road network, which you can just see beyond the SPMT. the road in the background, and there is just one car travelling over the bridge. But you can see that we decided on balance to keep that road open, despite the bridge moving being a potential distraction to motorists. And that really helped. And that was all down to the testament and hard work and collaborative planning that was developed between HS2, LM and ourselves. At 5 p.m, local congestion had all but disappeared, which again you can see on the heat mapping. So what challenges did we face? Obviously, the big game changer was the country's, indeed the world's, passage through COVID. All our previous tried and trusted working practices had to be totally changed and briefed out to staff. Fortunately, because all the work was outdoors, it allowed us to continue to keep working. COVID also lessened traffic volumes, so delays were actually less than we'd planned for, which was an unintended bonus really for ourselves. Another challenge was that on the 8th of August, it was one of the hottest days of the year locally. And no, we hadn't read the wrong script, and your eyes don't deceive you. There is a tractor actually going backwards and forwards, towing a Bowser, spreading water on the carriageway. The reason HS2 were watering the carriageway from first light on the 8th was to try and keep the M42 cool when the heavy bridge was moved into place. We have a weather station a couple of miles away from this location near the Solihull junction at junction 5, and at the peak of the day the road surface temperature reached 51.3. This is hot enough to make the carriageway surface become tacky, and was absolutely the reason why all the planning in the days before and watering the carriageway paid off. At the same time as that first image, this is the image of how the second bridge was progressing in August. So you can see to the right of the image, the road that we kept open whilst the new bridge was put into place. However, by Saturday, the 24th of October, the weather couldn't have been more different. The area experienced around 20 hours of fairly intense rain, with about half a month's rainfall for this region falling in that short period of time. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the image a stream of water running alongside the carriageway, and everywhere is absolutely soaking wet. And please spare a thought for our hard-working staff who worked on both bridge moves. Having struggled with the heat and sunburn for Bridge 1, they were then soaked to the skin for Bridge 2. We also had the challenge that second bridge lift of strong gusting winds on Thursday afternoon and Friday, sometimes touching 45 miles an hour, when we had a maximum and allowable wind speed of 25 miles an hour. So really testing time and put our resilience plans through their paces. As with all schemes, we always set aside time to look back and learn so we can try to improve future planning and avoid repeating the same mistakes or challenges twice. As an example of this, on Saturday the 8th of August in the morning, an abnormal load joined the M40 from London. As the driver was travelling north, he kept seeing our signing saying that the M42 was closed ahead of him. Doing the correct thing, he pulled over into Warwick Services and contacted our customer information line on 0300 123 5000. Our advice was for him to stay where he was in the services because he had all the amenities there. And then once the M42 had reopened, the abnormal load could resume its journey. Abnormal loads are restricted to the route that they have to travel on, so that might be because of their height, weight, length, or speed restrictions. So they're very heavily controlled on what they can and can't do. Obviously, the lesson that was learnt here was that the driver's company's paperwork needed to be clearer to read, and it was only by his intuitive decision to go into Warwick Services that saved us from having to deal with an abnormal load also stuck inside our closures. But overall, we were very pleased that the weeks and months of information that we had shared with the motorist were taken on board, and although there was some congestion, it never reached or exceeded the modelling that we had predicted. And a final thought, for anyone that does know me, I'm a fairly optimistic person. Actually, the role I perform makes me a professional pessimist. I then work with a wide variety of partners to overcome, mitigate, reduce the impacts of activities that they're undertaking on our network. But both bridge lifts went like clockwork and were delivered hours and hours early, despite the weather conspiring to sideline both schemes for a while. And as a final thought, were we lucky? I'm often asked this question for these types of events, and I always reply, it's really, really strange, but the more we plan, the luckier we get. Thanks so much for listening and taking a sneak peek of what goes on behind the scenes. If I can now, I'd like to hand you over to Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Frank. So one of the things that we knew we had to get right during the lead up to the weekend closures for the bridge installations was our communication of the works and what the impacts of this would be and what travellers should do to minimise disruption. As obviously it's not possible to close roads as big as this, as major as this, without causing some disruption. This is again something we worked really closely with Highways England on, and we had a joint communications and engagement plan, and we were really supported in our delivery of that plan by Transport for the West Midlands, who alongside Highways England are really the experts on communicating travel impacts, and of course Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council, who are the local authority for this area. So wherever possible, we made sure that we prepared key stakeholders such as businesses, local authorities, local community groups for these works by trailing them really early, so that, for example, for the M42 bridge installation, we were talking to people about that for about a year before it happened, and then we just released the actual closure date 4 weeks before it happened to ensure that we had that last big push to communicate to a much wider audience. We also provided joint briefings for the HS2 help desk and the Highways England Customer Contact Centre, so that on the weekend of the closures, the people who would actually be speaking to members of the public would be given the same correct information and the same message, whether they called the HS2 help desk or the Highways England Contact Centre, and it provided that one point of contact. The main thing that we did for each closure is to produce an engagement and communications toolkit, and this an example of some of the parts of this on the screen now. This was where Transport for the West Midlands really supported us, as they've developed a set of tools and branding so that people can instantly recognise information that's likely to be about travel disruption, and they can act accordingly. These toolkits contain information that businesses and other organisations can use to put on their websites, use as social media posts, or use as posters and flyers in offices, or email around companies so that their staff and customers are made aware of any works. And this enables us to get the word out much more widely than we'd be able to do via our contacts alone. So, for example, the M42 weekend closure was issued to a total of 174 businesses, and that was then issued much more widely via their channels, and that was in evidence by how many things we sort of saw coming back to us through social media and things. In terms of media and social media, again, the Highways England and TFW Transport for West Midlands team really supported the scheme with this, as their accounts are obviously the place that people are much more likely to go to for this kind of travel information. So taking a partnership approach on this was really vital. Social media is obviously such a great way to communicate with people about these kind of works, and Highways England, for example, got around 1,800 views from just 2 Twitter posts and around 150 views on Facebook. We also all put content on our websites about these closures, posting the same information at the same time, but in different places and using our different sort of formats. For our HS2 local sites, we were able to update subscribers. And so again, we contacted around 2,000 people with the post that we did on our website. On contingency planning, and Nick mentioned before that we did have contingency weekends just for both of these in case we needed to postpone. My colleague from LM in particular did a brilliant job preparing materials for every possible outcome. So if the works had to be delayed, we had materials for that could go out at short notice. If for any reason the road didn't reopen on time, we had materials for that, and we were prepped and ready to go in case of any eventuality. And we were absolutely delighted that we didn't need to use any of those materials. As partners, we were all really pleased with how the communications went, and as a result, for the M42, we had just 19 calls across all of the partners' contact centres, and for the A446 works, we had just 2 calls across all partner contact centres, one of which was complimentary. Having covered how we planned the bridge moves, what happened in terms of the traffic and our communication of the moves, we're now going to show you, fingers crossed everything works, a time-lapse video of the M42 bridge move, which shows this all coming together and putting the bridge in place and reopening the road 22 hours ahead of schedule. Brilliant. So I hope everybody enjoyed that video. I certainly never get tired of watching that all come together. Thank you to all of our speakers as well for the amazing insight into all of the work that goes into something like this. I hope the panel are all now ready to take questions from the audience. So just a reminder, you can post your questions in the chat, which you can access at the top right of the screen. So the slide now is showing you exactly where that should be on your screen, and we will try and get through as many questions as possible in the remaining time. Before we start to respond to your questions, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and we hope that the session has given you a bit of an insight into some of the work we're undertaking and why we're doing it. I would also like to introduce Tim from Highways England, who is joining to support the panel today. Tim is the Divisional Director for Highways England with responsibility for Highways England's interaction with HS2. I'd also like to welcome back Alistair, Nick and Frank as we now open up the session for questions. Right, let me just switch between screens and find a question for you all. So I think firstly we will go to Frank. We've had one question, which is the route planning advice for roadworks is excellent, but it does require that motorists know which junction numbers are relevant to their trip. Many do, but not everyone does. Is there some other way that this information can be communicated? Frank, are you okay to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a really good question, Andrew. It is one of the difficulties that we face, which is part of the reason why we always tell people to plan and prepare, as well as using sat-navs. We also ask people always to carry a paper map. I don't go anywhere without a paper map these days, but then I'm probably a bit old school. But yes, it is one of the challenges that we face. What we were able to tell people is that when you were coming, say, for instance, up the M40, that the M42 was closed in front of them, and it is one of the challenges that we face. We do know that some people will have not taken that advice and will have continued up the M42 to find it closed at junction 6. One of the challenges that we have, and I know Rachel and her team did some outstanding work with the communications for the closure, but you know we do find that some people will ignore our advice, and also the gantry message that we put up has to be fairly quickly and easily digested when you're traveling at 70 miles an hour. So if we started listing, you know, junction names and that sort of thing, it would have made the sign so big, we wouldn't have got all the message on the screen in time. So it's very much a case of we try and pique people's interest, and then we hope that they will do a little bit of background work, which is why we always say plan and prepare every journey that you take. Don't assume that the motorway or even your local road is going to be open ahead of you. I hope that answers your question, Andrew.
Rachel, you're on mute.
Sorry, it had to happen, didn't it? So thank you very much for that, Frank. I think for the next question, we will go to Nick, if that's okay. I guess you were involved in both of the bridge moves. Which was the most exciting part of the move for you?
I think for the size and scale and complexity and planning that we had in place, the M42 was the biggest thing. Again, you mentioned it was the first significant structure on the M42, interface with Highways England and HS2. And just looking at the years of planning, in effect, to watch a near 3,000 ton structure drive up the M42, after knowing all the plans and preparations we had, that was fantastically exciting for me personally. Something to have on the TV going forward. And then we did it again, repeated it again on the A446, different challenges, and again it was a fantastically exciting moment to see all the years of planning and coordination and build and construction come to fruition.
Thanks, Nick. That's great. And I'll do a question for Alistair. Just see if I can find it. So Alistair, will all HS2 bridge installations be done like this in future?
That's a good question, Rachel. Well, it might be possible to install some other structures on the HS2 route in this way. Whether or not it's the best thing to do really depends on the particular circumstances of each structure. For example, what the particular constraints of the site are, the road network in the area, the size of the bridge, the type of bridge. These factors all play into this. Sometimes it's not possible, other times it is. Other times, maybe it simply isn't the best thing to do. What we would do, though, is we'd work with Highways England for each bridge installation to determine what is the most appropriate method of installation in relation to the impact on the travelling public, whether it be by the approach that was done on these weekends or by some other way.
Thank you, Alistair. That's great. And Tim, question for you. So, how did you sort of ensure internally, obviously Highways England and HS2 have to work together a lot, but how did you ensure that there was kind of support for what HS2 were proposing across Highways England?
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So right from the start of the planning of this, a lot of people involved and a lot of communication in the background. I suppose this first bridge, the M42 bridge, was the first major piece of work over the strategic road network. So a lot of interest from Highways England right across our directorates and parts of our business. And because it was the first one, there was obviously a lot of support from Highways England and High Speed 2 senior leaders and the supply chain senior leaders, Lang Murphy, as well. So all of that together helped to give it the right focus. But a lot of communication in the background, regular presentations, regular updates to all those affected. You heard from Frank earlier about all the planning from an operational perspective. So Frank and others working with Frank have been involved from a very early stage. So really understanding what we wanted to achieve across the first and then the second bridge. And I suppose as well as that, then the team between the two organisations put together a process of reviews, readiness reviews, counting down to the event. And some of those reviews included some of our senior leaders, giving them the opportunity to check and challenge and make sure things were ready in the way that we were saying they were ready. Because when you're doing a first piece of work like this between two organisations with a whole new team, then it's really about building confidence that you have everything in place and considered all that you'd want to consider and what might go wrong and how you're planning for what might go wrong. So a gradual building of confidence with lots of senior level support and lots of reviews along the way to make sure we weren't missing anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That's great. We've had another question, which I'm going to sort of try and answer myself because I'm chairing the panel and I always take the privilege of answering a question myself for some reason. So we've had a question that's appreciate the first two have been covered, though I'd appreciate anything further you have to add on what road closures will it result in, for how long, what communications and stakeholder engagement we did, main issues or blockers, any specific groups we had problems with and why, and steps we took and how far in advance we launched communications. So for the whole sort of programme of HS2, obviously we have quite a lot of interaction with the road network, be it run by a Highways Authority or Highways England. So it's not kind of possible to go into all the detail of each of those particular interactions now, and the programme kind of continues to develop. I would say that as with everything that we do on HS2, we absolutely try to sort of minimise the impact on the travelling public or local residents, and part of that obviously is in our engagement programme. So what we did on this scheme was very much because it was our first major sort of piece of infrastructure going in, we really developed quite a detailed package of what we do, and we were part of the reason why we're so pleased with how well that works is because that is something that we can continue to roll out. But for every sort of road closure, lane closure, any sort of temporary traffic lights, we put out advanced work notifications, so they go on all of our local area websites. We do get support for bigger pieces of work from, again, Highways England, the local authorities, Transport for West Midlands, to put that out across their channels. So we do a lot of kind of one-to-one stakeholder engagement. So particularly in interchange area, for example, we have a lot of really key regional and sometimes national businesses. And so we always make sure that we talk early to them about what's going on for them at that particular time, try and plan in things for certain times of the year when they're likely to be quieter, make sure that we do bespoke communications for them and any of their audiences. And in terms of how far in advance we launch communications, it tends to be as far in advance as we possibly can. Obviously, we have to go through various different consenting processes, and sometimes it's about timing that as well, so that we're talking to people a lot about it. But for example, we didn't release the date of this closure until 4 weeks in advance, because you want to kind of keep that so that you're ready and certain and can have that last push and say to everybody, right, we've talked, this is going to happen. Now it is happening. Here's all the information that you need to get people to kind of pay attention to it. So hopefully that's answered the question. If there's any kind of follow up to that, again, I would say contact our help desk and we'll be happy to kind of between Highways England, HS2 and LM give you sort of chapter above. I'll just see if we've got any other questions. I guess maybe for Nick, what was the sort of biggest challenge in planning and delivering these bridge moves?
Okay, thank you, Rachel. The initial challenge was securing the date, given the proximity to the stakeholders, the NEC, the airport. They all have key users coming in and volumes and metrics coming in. So securing the actual date was the primary challenge, and that took a lot of communication, again, with Highways England and the local highways authorities. A lot of information was run between the parties to secure a weekend with a contingency weekend off the back of it. So that was the sort of primary challenge initially. Once that date was set, we then moved on to the physical installation and the challenges that threw up. So moving a 2,750 ton structure up the M42 will provide its own challenges. Getting it from where it's been built in the construction area adjacent and physically moving it onto the carriageway. We had to cross a number of assets from Highways England, the drainage and street lighting and communications cables. They all need diverting or protection. And then there's the loading on the M42 itself, the significant axle loading. And what we didn't want to do was, as a result of the move, damage any part of the network, which would have prevented reopening at the end of it. So all that was very challenging. There's a lot of technical reviews going on, a lot of designer reviews, structural analysis, and as well as that, it's the actual move of the deck itself. Moving it on the SPMT, whilst it's flat and slow and steady at nothing more than a walking pace, what we didn't want to do is make sure that the bridge moved and flexed, because it's on a series of structural beams with a concrete deck. The last thing we need is for that to flex and move during transport, resulting in cracking, and we assessed that throughout the move with the ongoing real-time data fed back to the team who were moving it. Ultimately, we didn't want to put it in, land it onto its bearings, find a big crack down the middle of it, lift it up and take it off again. So those are the key challenges physically for the weekend.
Brilliant, thank you, Nick. And Frank, can I just ask, so you showed us obviously the heat maps and where you were looking at things in the control centre. Did Highways England have extra staff on that weekend, so extra patrols and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We had 3 extra patrols on the Saturday. Fortunately, we were able to stand them down because you opened it so quickly on the Sunday. That was it was a real bonus for those that had volunteered. And that happened for both bridge lifts. We had staff on the road, 3 extra patrols. We also had a number of extra staff in the control room. I myself was on duty with one of my colleagues. So as Tim mentioned earlier on, there was a lot of extra activity for both bridges. And I like you, we at one point we actually had to almost instruct some of our staff in the control room to go on the brakes, because over the weeks and months they'd slowly seen this bridge being constructed at the side of the road. The M42 one, certainly we could pick up on the cameras, and there was real excitement that Saturday afternoon when we saw it being lifted into place, and a number of people in our control room actually gave up their tea breaks and their lunch breaks because they didn't want to miss this bridge being moved. There was such excitement, and there was a cheer went up when it drove onto the M42. One of the 3 images that I showed you in the PowerPoint, that there was just huge excitement and elation. In the very, very early days, we had all sorts of conspiracy theories people phoning in saying, is it going to be because of the size of the roof, or so they thought it was a roof. They thought we were getting asked questions. Was this going to be a new service area at the side of the road? Was it a warehouse? And that just gives you an idea of the size of the structure. And, you know, regulars, drivers would drive up and down and say, when's it going to move? When's it going to move? So there was excitement, I think, in the region. This is the biggest structure that I've ever been involved in, moving on the motorway network. So yeah, real excitement for everybody. Lots and lots of extra hours were worked, but that is our usual plan anyway. You know, we want to get as many people in and working as possible, because just in case things go wrong. Thankfully, as I alluded to earlier, we were able to stand everybody down on both Sundays, so that was great.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, it is exciting. It's exciting to watch the video. It's still exciting to me driving past it. When I drive underneath it, I still get a bit, the bridge. Thank you very much. And we'll just have, I think, one last question for Alistair. So obviously, as Nick kind of outlined, this was kind of a slightly innovative sort of method of moving the bridge. Are there any other areas in which HS2 is sort of innovating on construction methodology?
Thanks, Rachel. And yes, absolutely. And with the vast program of works that HS2 has, it's a perfect opportunity to be bringing in new methods and new techniques of doing things. And innovation really is key to the success of HS2. And we'll be looking to introduce innovation for design, for construction, in order to really benefit safety, both for the design and for the operation and maintenance, and also to help reduce cost and improve quality and sustainability and so on. I mean, you can see it on this bridge installation, not only in the way that we did the weekend working, but also, as Nick outlined earlier, where the way we used the DFMA, so the design for manufacture and assembly, whereby the bridge components were constructed off-site in controlled factory conditions, then assembled on-site, which significantly sped up the construction process, increased the quality of the production, and had great safety benefits. And there's other initiatives like that that are being used across HS2.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Alistair. Sure, we'll do more webinars about different sorts of innovation as we come up across them. OK, so I think that might be all of the questions for now. So with just a few minutes left to go, I will just move on to the final few slides, if that's OK. And so thanks to our panel today for your presentations and for sitting and answering those questions. If you do have any additional questions, or you're thinking about it later and come up with some questions, please do just get in touch with our help desk on 08081 434 434. The Minicom number is also there, and then you can also email our HS2 inquiries desk, or visit the website at hs2.org.uk. The inquiries line is open 24 hours, 7 days a week. So if you wake up at 3 in the morning thinking with the heat and think, I must just ask that question, please give them a ring. They'll be happy to talk to you, and we can feed those questions back to all our experts on the panel today. So feedback is also really important to us, so we can learn what people thought about the session, whether you thought it was worthwhile, and how we could improve it in the future. Also, if you wanted to suggest topics that you'd like to hear more about, please do fill in the feedback form. The link for it is there, and that will also be sent to you following the webinar on the address that you registered with. You can find out more about the HS2 project on the HS2 website, which I mentioned previously, hs2.org.uk. And we've also got our local community websites, which host a lot more information about stations, for example. That is now also on the main website, as we are starting to move information from local websites across to our main website. You can also stay in touch with our progress, so please visit the website for that. And there's lots of latest news, and on our events page, you can find out more about future webinars like this one. So thank you once again for joining on this really beautiful sunny day. You may not have wanted to be on your laptop, but we do appreciate it and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. Have a great day. Bye.